Everybody hear us? You're muted. Bailey Johnson.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, what do you on, Marty?
We don't even remember. Okay, freedom for it. Okay, so Linda on.
Yeah. Oh, Linda, no.
Okay, so this is the November meeting of the legal committee. Roll call. In the room here, we have Arch. Here. And online, I think we have Ronnie. And we also have Morris. And online, we have Crystal Peck. And also in the room, we have Tom DiPietro. So we have a fairly full agenda tonight. I had emailed you all that we will get through what we can. But I do want to keep the meeting to 1 hour. So the first item is, it's document number 1 in your folder, Tom.
Okay. Get there if I could go this thing. I get rid of that. Art?
Yeah,
How do I get rid of that little black screen up there?
the little black screen up at the top.
Yeah,
Got the little arrow
yeah.
in the green bar.
There
Okay.
we go. Hold on, folks.
Oh, if you click the little down arrow, it should.
There it
Oh,
goes.
there it goes.
Okay, and I'm looking for number 1.
Yeah, it's the one that's labeled number 1.
Hudson speed limit proposal?
Yeah.
We got it. There we go.
Okay, so, this document, is a proposal from Creighton Manning. A couple of months ago, I shared with you some information from an entity that I think had done a similar, engineering company that had done work up in Rensselaer County. I was given information on Creighton Manning that they also do this work. So I reached out to them and described what we're trying to do. They have done this in other municipalities. They are very familiar with Hudson. I didn't get a formal proposal from the first group, but the pricing that Creighton Manning is saying is what I'm hearing from other companies as well. It's a fairly straightforward process. As you can see, it's a very brief proposal. That they would collect speed data, they would be requesting crash records from DOT. I have already met with the Hudson Police Department, and they're going to be sending me quarterly information. There's a quarterly report that lists violations, which I'm going to use to call out a year's worth of speeding violations. And then they will also give me a 1-year report of motor vehicle accidents, and so that way, we will see how much we're getting in terms of speeding. So what I would like to do with this particular piece is take this to the informal council next week. So the council can look at it, then we look at the process. If we want to move forward on this, look at the process for, talk to Chris about what we have to do in terms of whether we need a resolution saying we're going to go forward with this. I also need to find out whether or not I need to get another written proposal from another company. But in my discussions with Creighton Manning, they were all very, very familiar with all of the streets in Hudson, and were able to speak, very knowledgeably about, exactly where this would have the most impact and so forth. So, if there are no objections, I'm going to take this to the informal next week.
Okay.
Ronnie, any comments?
I just had a question, I guess. This is the engineering firm that we always, or we have previously used, is that correct?
That's correct. They have worked with us quite a bit. They worked on, they were involved with the Stewart corner
Right.
work.
I'm just asking because that way, I was Otherwise, I would have asked if we sought out any other proposal, but if we've worked with them before, I'm satisfied that we haven't sought other.
I think I may have to get another proposal. I did speak to another entity. That was not that familiar with Hudson personally, but the process is the same with both.
Margaret, and I just, be clear, you can do it with an email, you don't have to,
Excuse me?
you can get the proposal by email, you don't have to do anything really formal.
No, yeah, that's
Okay.
all, but all that, he emailed this to me.
Oh, okay, because I saw this fancy letter.
No, this came to me by email,
Okay.
and, I will do the same with the other company that I reached out to. I'll ask them to send me an email, proposal, cost proposal,
Oops.
okay?
So,
So we will take that to the informal next week. The next item is, there are two documents here, Tom, number 2 and number 3.
okay. Which one should I go first?
I'd like you to, let me go to find your arthritic one. Or to close to the one that has the full code. I think you're on the right one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's. So. When we looked at this, I think at the last council meeting. All we had was the sections of the code that were being amended. And, I had difficulty actually getting, because of the new website, I had difficulty getting into the full code. And so I had a number of questions, relating to, some discrepancies between city-sponsored versus non-city sponsored, discussion of glass, garbage, that kind of thing. So, I worked with, Michael to go through the full existing code, which is what you've got here. And some of the inconsistencies that we were seeing, were actually already in the existing code, they weren't new to the amendment. So we worked through it to try to address, make sure that everything that we had brought up in the previous meeting was addressed. And in different places, all of those concerns are, I think, covered. So, if you go to the, next page, Tom.
The next document or a different
The next
page?
page of this,
Okay.
the top that says Waterfront Park,
All right, hold on a second.
you scroll down.
I'm trying to scroll the name.
Okay, so this is where we begin to have, the, set definitions of the venues. One thing when I was reviewing this, Crystal, that we do need to add, because we're expanding the venues that would be allowed. So, we have only defined Waterfront Park here, so we will need to define also, 7th Street Park and Promenade Hill up at the top. That's fairly straightforward. So, again, the section 65(2)B simply expands the locations to include 2 more parks and also streets. The item 65.4, this was not in what we looked at before because it wasn't changed. This is around, you shall not throw or discard any bottle, can or container. So that addresses the garbage issue, that was not clear in the last version. And then on the next item, 65.6, possession of containers. 5.7, no person shall possess any glass bottles, containers, or other glass objects while such a person is in a public park or playground. So this will apply to what we're doing here. The other area where that is addressed, if you scroll down to 65. B, 65B, item 2. 65B2.
Eight, here.
Yeah, we're still in 8. 65B2.
There we go.
So it's, what it says here is unless otherwise allowed, beer and wine shall be brought into the facility or event serving area prior to the start and shall be stored securely at a common bar prior to service. shall be served only from a common bar. And then the next item is, no service containers, etc. of wine shall be allowed on the tables, but shall remain at the common bar for service. So this really addresses the concern potentially of, if we have alcohol and people are being given bottles of beer or cans of beer, so they have to serve it at a bar. So I think that addresses it.
Ronnie has his hand raised.
Yep, Ronnie, go ahead.
I have a question specific to the section we're talking about, number 2 right here.
Yeah.
We mentioned that it has to be brought prior. Does that mean, let's say a brewery that is, down the street and they run out of beer, they cannot go and refill their beer? Are we prohibiting that because of other reasons? Am I explaining myself clearly?
Yeah, this was already in the existing code. I'm not sure why it was written that way, but it was not amended. This is how it's currently written.
Okay.
Do you have any comment on that, Crystal?
Well, I don't know if it's a requirement, like a state requirement. I would have to look into it if there's any like specific legal reason behind it. I do think it probably makes sense to make sure everything's coming in as opposed to, being brought in after the event started. And I understand that a lot of events will typically require a separate place for beer and wine consumption, and that would prevent that from spilling out to some of the other places. So it probably helps contain it. I can see logical reasons for having that in place. But whether there's a state legal requirement, I'd have to look.
Crystal, Tom and I were talking about this, and Michael and I were talking about this. We were talking about a scenario where you have a gathering, maybe it's an informal gathering, they've got a permit, they're going to serve alcohol, and people are bringing their own 6-packs. I think that this gets at not allowing that.
That's all.
I think it's really getting at people not bringing in their own. It has to be in place and served from a common location.
Yes, because if you're going to have an event like this and it's going to be a sponsored event, you're not going to have people bringing in BYOB. You're going to have it either done by a licensed caterer or have a special permit through the state for that event. I absolutely agree.
But Ronnie, I think this language here really prevents that scenario where I'm going to bring my own 6-pack.
I understand. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so let's see. That was the glass issue. So I'm kind of trying to hit on the topics that we had discussed before. Let's see.
Well, the expenses that you had.
Hang on. If you go back to 65(8)(b), the introductory section.
Okay.
You're gonna have to go back. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
So when we were looking at this before, it wasn't clear whether the number of people present, because the way it was written before, even if you had less than 50, you still had to have insurance. And it was a little confusing as to what the difference was between less than 50, more than 50, serving alcohol, do you have to have a licensed caterer, and so forth. And I think, Crystal, that was something that we wanted to ask you about, but we decided to remove the language around the number of people. So that for all events under this section, the event sponsor is not a licensed caterer or otherwise licensed to serve or sell alcohol beverages. The sponsor shall be required to engage a licensed caterer. And I think from what I could find, when I was looking in New York State law, I think you have to have a licensed caterer and it's not tied to the number of attendees. And that's
So Margaret, I think where the 50 came from was that there's been a recent change to the state law, and it used to make it so that a caterer, licensed caterers that couldn't seat under 50 weren't able to get an off-premises license to serve alcohol. That's now been amended in the state law, but I think that's where that 50 came from originally with this.
But I think taking that out, because even with the amendments that we were doing in the old code, they still have to have insurance, so it doesn't make any sense to make this differentiation. Because if you have an event with less than 50 where you're serving alcohol, you still need a caterer or you need a license. Right.
Yeah, well, if you're having an event where people are coming in and you're serving the public, or there's, there's any sort of payment to get into it, yes, absolutely. You need a license. If you're talking about a private party, it's a little bit of a different situation. I've been digging into that, but regardless, with the law change anyway, yes, you're gonna have the insurance for under 50. It's now allowing for small businesses and small catering operations now to be able to cater these types of events. So you're gonna have the insurance requirement with this.
So if you're having a private, if you've got a mass meeting permit, you're having a private, family reunion thing in one of the parks. That, or you have a company that is having a private event for their own staff. Is that different from these public events?
Companies are different. Businesses have special requirements. If you're going to have a private event, you're going to have it at some sort of commercial venue. You may be required to get a special permit. It's not the same as an alcohol a license. It's a 1-day permit that you apply for. It's valid, I believe, for like 24 hours, and you cannot go to your average liquor store or your grocery store to get your beer and wine. When you're operating under that permit, you can only use wholesale distributors and wineries, licensed wineries and breweries. I have not been able to find a situation in which you've got, say, someone having a family reunion, they're having 30 people and they're going to a park. A situation like that is covered under the state law. I have found those types of situations, however, covered under local municipal laws, where they either will not allow you to serve alcohol in those, in that situation, or if you're going to serve alcohol, you're going to have to bring in a caterer, but that usually is in conjunction with a gathering permit that they're getting from the municipality to be able to have, their private party at that venue, whether it's a park or to reserve the space.
So as it's currently written, if you were having you had a permit to have a reunion or a private event, you would be required to have insurance and you'd be required to have a caterer. The same would be true of a company having an event. So are you okay with that, or do we need?
Yeah, that's absolutely in line with how other municipalities handle the situation. I think that's appropriate.
All right, so that was that change. Let's see. We talked about having the alcohol there prior to, and then it has to be served from a common location. We added language under B4. Expenses relating to event safety and security may be charged to the applicant based on estimate costs to the city. We added that to cover any additional costs associated with policing, so that these are for non-city events, so the sponsor needs to pay for additional policing. Item C, we omitted the additional venues here, Crystal, so we need to add those in there. It just references Waterfront Park. We need to add the other venues. Okay. Then when we go to 65.9, this is the city piece. This was actually this was much more consistent than the non-city ones. So all we did here, it was already there, was adding the additional locations. And that was it. There weren't issues because the city piece had been done before. So Ronnie, do you have any other questions on this, or do you think this is ready to go to the informal?
Yeah, I think we addressed most of the concerns we had in the the formal meeting the last time, so.
Are you good with selling it?
Yeah, I agree with that.
The other document you have relating to this is not labeled number 2.
Number 3, but that's all right.
Oh, no, sorry, excuse me, it's labeled number 3. So, what we did here was simply add language on the legislative intent, which is, the intent of this is, to provide additional locations for permissible sale, use, and possession of alcohol, etc. So, and then it contains the amended code, but the only change that we made to the local law was to put in a clear legislative intent. Okay, just checking, see if there are any comments. Anybody got that?
Nope.
No.
Okay, so
All right. Our next item is community choice aggregation. And that one is, that's number 4 and 5. I don't know, Crystal, do you want us to begin with the local law or with the
I
longer?
think the other document was really just for the council's own education. But I think that if you just go into some of the drafting sections that were highlighted, when this was originally put together, there just needs to be,
So this is not, we're not talking about the local law document, right? We're talking about the longer document.
no, we're talking about the local law document. The other document is really just an education piece for the council so that they can find out more information about the program and how it's actually operated and how it's administered.
I did have some questions on that one, but that's okay. Well,
I may or may not be able to answer some of those questions because I'm familiarizing myself as well with the choice, the CCA programs.
so, Art, do you have questions on either of these documents? Ronnie?
Not really, thank you.
Okay, so Crystal, when I was going through the local law. On page 4 of the
Mhm.
Right there.
and this is where you have your drafting notes.
Well, so these were initially, this local law was initially drafted and submitted to the council, why was it by the, oh, it was one of the, it was,
Conservation advisory.
It's brought by
Thank you.
Stevens.
Thank you, yes. So what they had done is they grabbed the model law. Now, the model law is a great template, but it also has certain situations as drafting notes in it that need some policy determinations. So for example, when you look at the eligibility, section 4, where it has classes of people that are, classes of residents that would that it could apply to. And that's where you've got you've got residential, general service, commercial, and industrial rate classes. What I did is I just took a look to see how other municipalities have handled this, particularly the ones that are actually trying to administer this program. And these classes are in line with what they had. So I would recommend just keeping what you've got, what was already submitted in there for that section.
So my question actually here was in describing the process where it requires notifying customers, keeping track of new customers, notifying them that they're in this, giving them a 30-day period to opt out and so forth. And you had a comment, administrators may request a monthly list from utility of new customers in the municipality and may enroll them consistent with current program rules, etc. So I think we now have to think about who is going to do this. And how it's
Is it
going to.
possible for the document to be a little bit more zoomed in? It's very, just for the people online.
Can you zoom in?
No.
No,
Yes,
okay.
No.
I think I can probably do that. Can you go to your Zoom?
I can pull it up. I just meant for people that are only,
You go to-
can
you go-
look at that.
There's nobody else here except for
I
Chris.
know.
Yeah.
I think there's.
You're gonna, if you want to zoom in, just go to the plus button on the side, on the right-hand side, on the bottom.
Yeah. I would have.
Right, and then you can do Zoom 150%.
Yep, keep going down, keep going down.
You're almost there. There it is.
Right there, oh,
Up one.
yep. Now click on that a couple times. Or not.
Nope.
Never mind, didn't work.
I think he accidentally right click instead of left click.
On the keyboard, Tom?
Yeah.
Control plus.
Control plus what?
Just the plus.
Just the plus there.
Oh, there's the.
Hit it
Much-
again.
Ah,
That's
Okay.
much better. Thank you.
oh, man, now we're like. Yes.
So Margaret, when you're concerned about the administrator, what I'm seeing and what's also in the program guidance is that a lot of municipalities hire a third-party administrator. It's a company that's going to go ahead and actually handles a lot of this for the city. And that's where when you see administrators referenced in here, that's what I'm referencing is these third-party administrators. And that's where the local law allows the city to go ahead and contract with them with a third-party administrator to help it facilitate this program.
Okay, yeah, because, you know, that would be keeping track of this and keeping track of new enrollees and so on. As we implement that, we need to think very carefully about how we're gonna do that.
And
Then, go on.
honestly, that's something that the city may want to reach out to, you know, some of the third-party administrators that handle this for other municipalities because they
That's
may
exactly-
have, I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, I mean, that's exactly what they recommended.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because and I'm thinking they're gonna have insight on how some of these, you know, on what the city may want to do. So for example, if you're looking at, you know, section 4, number C, subsection C, where it's talking about whether you want to go on an opt-in or an opt-out basis. If you go on an opt-out basis, it might be less work administratively, but an opt-in basis may get us less participation. What's the pros and cons of that? And that's where those third-party administrators should, I would think, would have some more insight that could help us with what direction we'd want to go into. We could always pass the law as it is and amend it later, but it may be worth reaching out in advance.
They also, know about all the different options in terms of the companies that we might want to do.
Mhm.
So, you know, in that same vein,
Next page.
yeah, under customer service. Again, 9 to 5 customer service resolve complaints. Again, I was thinking, well, who's going to do that? So if we will need some third party doing that.
Yeah.
Because it's not realistic for us to have a 9 to 5, 5 day a week call center. You have a drafting note. All consumers will have the option to opt out. This is under 5B at any time without penalty. But you had a drafting note to suggest that we may want to consider a fee if they opt out after 3 cycles, because there may be a fee with whatever energy supply company we're dealing with. Is that what you're saying there?
So these drafting notes, my comments are off to the side, but the actual drafting notes are
Oh, I see.
where are coming from the model law and what it wants the municipalities that, you know, NYSERDA wants the municipalities to consider when they're putting together some of these provisions. So that's where what I did is I went through the program rules and I saw, you know, I found what correlates to these drafting notes. What are the considerations that we need to take into account? And this is another one where, you know, a third-party administrator may actually be very helpful on this because any sort of termination fees are going to be subject to our contracts with the, you know, with the energy providers. And then there's also uniform business practices that they also have to adhere to. So we would want to take all of that into consideration if we're going to be charging fees and how much, you know, what those fees would be, would be.
But in the event that we don't have a contract that requires that somebody opting out has to, somebody terminating with the energy company has to pay a fee, then it would make sense not to be charging, they can opt out at any time without a fee would be the preferable way to go.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I don't know if there's any cost to the city after that third billing cycle. Is there any sort of cost that we're incurring? That is something that needs to be, you know, then, you know, passed off to the resident.
Let's see, advisory group, this is made up of 5 people, CHD, treasurer, 2 councillors and the mayor. And that seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you had a question about whether this should be under reporting. Whether this should go to the common council or to the mayor's office for reporting, so I don't know how people feel about that. Any recommendations? Your art?
Or the legal committee. It says on the original, but yeah, I think we should put it in the common council.
I don't think it should come to the legal committee. Well, we don't have any authority to look at that.
That's fine, or actually, it probably should go to the mayor's office.
Right,
Well,
because
my instinct would be there, because it's
Yeah,
exactly the kind of thing,
yes,
and reporting should probably go there, that would be my instinct.
that's it.
Can we
Okay,
keep it as both, or would that be too difficult for the third party?
It probably would go to everyone, you're right. Would be a problem.
I mean, you can go to the city clerk and have it distributed to the
Yeah.
both that way.
Exactly.
so, the questions I have on the other document.
which other document?
There were 2 tree documents.
The other document is an explanation of the program.
Sort of,
Community choice
Yeah.
aggregation program rules.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. No, never mind, forget it, never mind.
Okay. So, we're done with that. The filming law. Is that it?
No, we're ready for trees,
Oh, what number is that?
it doesn't have a number.
Ooh, I'm gonna find it.
Hudson tree ordinance.
Okay, you see it? Numbered up there.
It came in after the others, so it was another.
Attachment. Okay, please get it on.
You might need to go to the welcome to the city of Hudson.
Oh, good point, because that's where he put the whole list.
Then go down.
Sure, bam. Open. Just your tab?
Right, yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Tree ordinance, yeah, so,
No, there it is up there. Wow.
and then control the plus. Okay. So, questions from Art or Ronnie on this? I have a few, but any questions?
I didn't get a chance to read these.
Okay, Ronnie?
No, I don't have any questions written.
So, going down to item 3. And this is something that Crystal and I have looked at the last version. So I want to make sure I am understanding this correctly, Crystal, the makeup of the tree board. There are gonna be 7 people. And amongst those 7 people, all 5 wards have to be represented. The CAC, the Common Council, Planning Board, DPW, and it must be an arborist. So it can be any combination thereof, but those criteria need to be met. Is that how, am I reading that right?
That's how this was initially drafted by, when it was proposed to the council. So I did not change that. The only thing I noted was that there does not appear to be a mayoral appointment other than, you know, if you're looking at someone from DPW or something to that extent.
Yeah, well, the reason for that, you might be aware of this, Crystal, but the
Planning Board.
Conservation Advisory Council is a creation of the Common Council. But it doesn't really report to the mayor.
But the Planning Board does,
Planning Board does,
and
yeah,
DPW does.
and the DPW does.
So in
So-
some capacity, you may have, you know, that representation on here through those 2 other those 2 other boards, representatives.
Okay,
Yeah, and I just struck through that we don't, yeah, we need to change language here about planning department, because we don't have one. We should just say planning board, go ahead.
Planning board.
it struck me that this board description is very aspirational. Partly because, unless you're gonna, the idea of getting a member from each city wards, I know they like that idea and they talked about it a lot, but gonna be hard. I mean, I think CAC itself should take on more of the role of this, but we can talk about that.
Yeah, I think Mike, I had a comment about that too. Basically, if we can make it that it's not a mandatory from each ward, because we don't want to put language in it that, let's say one ward we can't find a representative, doesn't mean that ward should be defunct or like less powerful. So if it could be like we make every attempt to have one from each member, or we allow at least one from each member, but
Yeah,
it can still function without
Something
one
like
from each
that.
member.
I think, Ronnie's saying allow, each ward to have a
Yes.
representative so that it might be 7 people all told, it may only be 5
Right.
by the
Yeah,
time we
if
meet.
you can get 3 people, then they should be able to still function without, having to think about quorum and all that.
Right, and the other thing that struck me was that we may not actually have an arborist residing in the city of Hudson who
We
is
don't.
willing to participate. So I
Right.
think it should also,
Like a preference given to someone from Hudson, but it could be someone else.
but it could be somebody who is interested in participating but doesn't live in Hudson.
Right.
Because there's language here that says you have to reside in Hudson.
Yeah. Which one was really? Yeah, that makes it very hard.
Okay,
Now, just to go back to what Margaret just said, the other way to do it too is you could also keep it to the county as opposed to Hudson, if you're concerned about that geographical restriction. You know, that's something to be considered. And then the other, Margaret, you and I had talked about this, if they can't get an arborist, if you can't get an arborist to be on the board, then the other option is to allow the board to hire a consultant arborist. That said, they will need a budget then, or it'll have to go through common council approval, like with the planning board, engineering consultants to get that approved.
right,
I think the best option would be to draft it now currently without the option to hire and see if we can get
Right.
volunteers before we amend it to see. Because if we have the language that we have the option to hire, I think people will be reluctant to join because then they can, charge for it.
but I think also, Ronnie, we can talk to CAC and ask them who they have in mind
I was at that meeting, I just think we should say that the arborist does not have to be the city.
doesn't have to be in the city,
Right.
but they may also know people who are willing.
It didn't seem to me.
Okay,
I mean, I was with that conversation.
so, on the next one, meetings,
Let me say that this was also inspired by other municipalities. that
but
are
this
much larger.
follows a structure of template from other.
Right, so it's a large, not as small place as we are. So, if you're talking, say, Kingston or Newburgh,
They
you're
would
more
have-
likely to have an arborist.
They could send one up here.
Is this what you want?
Yeah, meetings. Yeah, so, you had a note on here, Crystal, I agree with, it just says regular and special meetings open to the public. And you were saying, should we have a minimum, for example, 6 per year, I think that's reasonable,
Mhm.
and that we should have that.
Okay.
I have all my notes on here, so we can make these changes. Check mark there. Let's see, so then in terms of the powers of this board, its powers are largely around making recommendations. Not enforcing.
They were.
It's the very next thing, powers and duties. So, I think that's fine because the enforcement goes to, either code enforcement, or to Commissioner of Public Works or to the planning board. So they make recommendations to the planning board doesn't necessarily have to take their recommendations, but they can make recommendations. So I thought that this section was okay, Crystal.
Okay.
And yes, that is the database.
Okay, thank you. I needed to make sure of that.
Then there is a comment under E to review and process all tree planting permit applications, tree removal permit applications, and the accompanying mitigation. In this section, we're talking about public trees. Because there's a separate section on, you don't need a permit to remove a private tree that's not overhanging a public space on your own property. And we may want to add public trees there. Or qualify that in some way, because it doesn't apply to trees on private property that have no overhang of public land.
Which section are you on, Margaret?
This is powers and duties, section 4, item E. As an
Item E, thank you.
Yeah, tree removal, to review and process all tree planting permit applications and tree removal applications. And when I was reading through the removal applications, it relates to any park tree on the next page, park tree, public tree, roadside tree, street tree, or any tree growing in or near an easement or other public space.
Mhm.
So, I guess it's okay. I mean, we don't need to qualify because it's qualified on the permit section. But that applies specifically to public trees or trees overhanging in public space.
Mhm.
Okay, let's see. Tree removal, alteration and pruning. So we have 2 comments here. Any person who's aggrieved by any decision, can agree with the clerk, and you had a recommendation, consider review by standing committee of the common council rather than the entire council. I would agree with that.
Well,
Which means we have to create a standing committee, though. I mean, that's the other part of this.
you know, other appeals go to the, not that we've had any recently, but other board appeals go to the entire council.
Okay. I mean, and it's up to how you guys want to handle it. I wasn't sure if you wanted it to go to the full council on it.
Yeah, that's all. This is, well, it is kind of cool, but.
What's the process if you did something in front of the planning board?
Well, there's different ways of doing it. I know zoning can appeal to the council. I'm not sure about planning. Planning might have to be an Article 78.
Yeah, typically if it's a planning board determination, you're gonna file an Article 78. Sometimes there's a process to get over to the ZBA, but typically it's Article 78.
I think it would be easier to bring it to the council because the council's already on this. The council was on the commission to explain why they did what they did. Yeah, the removal thing is very clearly delineates exactly what kind of trees require permit. So it's not clear under element 7, tree removal, pruning and public spaces. Removal of trees in public places must adhere to the following requirements. Now this is, you know, I have a tree in front of my house and I want to remove it and I get a permit. They shall, with some exceptions that may be granted by the city, be done by certified insured arborists, etc. So if I get a permit to remove a tree in front of my house, it's on a public street, it's been approved, it's not diseased, but I've been given permission to remove it. We don't specify here who's paying for it. And I think that we should. Because if the tree, if it's a public tree being taken down because it's diseased or etc., then the city would pay for that. But it doesn't say anything here about a tree that somebody gets a permit to remove and it's not diseased. So I think we need to clarify who's paying for that. It's under 7.
Yep, I'm just making a note.
Okay. So I think you added this on the next page, Crystal, that we talked about. Oh, you say we should define minor pruning. Okay.
Well, actually, if you could just go back a second, Margaret, to the actual permits, is the board issuing the permit or is the board making, you know, a recommendation and code enforcement issues the permit? And it's just a matter of how is this being administered? Who's writing the paper? Who's signing it? How is this working out?
I have to read it again.
Okay, and then, you know, on those notes, on that note, if you've got the board issuing permits, I'm assuming those permits are then going to be filed in the building department's office. But those are the types of things administratively we would need to just, we don't
Yeah.
necessarily have to spell everything out in the law, but we need to figure them out.
Yeah.
Before this is in play.
Good. You have a comment that minor needs to be defined, so we can go back to DAC on the definition of minor project. Then I think section 8, this addresses the issue that we had, because there was nothing in it before that talked about dangerous trees that were a risk, on private property, not overhanging any public property. And Craig had nothing in code enforcement to address that. And I think this section here, I believe this is new, right, Crystal?
Yes, this was taken out of one of the state model laws.
Yeah, because this was not addressed in it before, and I think that this paragraph here really takes care of a situation where you have a private tree on private property that as to be a public nuisance and in danger of falling there by causing damage to person or property of others. So this gives code enforcement the authority to tell people to take a tree down and pay for it themselves.
Do we have a definition of arborist in the law? Or is that a legal term? Arborist?
Well, they're certified, and that is something that I meant to go back in and show that it has to be a yeah, I'll have to add that, Tom, because they are certified through the state.
So then, and so the average person you see out there removing trees, they're not necessarily arborists, right?
They are not, which is why I needed to find out from the committee, do you really want it to be an arborist that is in charge of taking down the trees? Because if you do that, you're really limiting the options residents have to just use a regular tree contractor, because most tree contractors do not have certified arborists.
Right, that's what I was investing.
Okay. So what's one other thing here?
Right now,
It's further. Okay, so that was good. I think adding in that section 8 was good. Tree restoration and mitigation. You have a comment, this whole section you have in green, and you have a comment here. Consider limited to projects that are under review by planning board. Or tree removal over a certain number.
So I would recommend using, I understand why they put this in here. I think that it's a bit overreaching. I would recommend using what the city of Kingston, I think it's the city of, no, not the city of Kingston. I think it was Rhinebeck where I grabbed how they handle, now you're looking at private property and private developments, and really what they're using their board for in those situations is making the recommendation to the planning board and adding into essentially their zoning procedure now, a referral to the board when projects come into the planning board that are requiring, cutting, and a recommendation process to the planning board that has to be considered in their approvals. And that was that separate document that I had sent over that had that section 106-5, that was taken from it, and I believe it was Rhinebeck's law.
Yeah, this was a sample language protection of trees and development projects.
as this.
Yeah, that's where I saw this thing that I was going to comment on in the sample language. Something that I think is very good here is the planning board, if let's see, the commission may make recommendations, the planning board, and then they respond, right? Or they send something to the board for review. The planning board shall act on the application on 30 days have expired from the receipt of the referral by the commission. So the planning board sends something over to the tree people to look at, in a development situation, that board has 30 days to respond to the planning board, and if they don't respond within 30 days, then the planning board can proceed. I thought
Yeah,
that
and
was,
and
Yeah,
that's standard procedure for planning boards anyway. I mean, they've got referrals to, the county planning boards that have a 30-day period. It's all, I don't think it's gonna delay projects.
yeah, so,
Yeah, okay, so then my thought would be to essentially work that into and essentially swap out that
Yeah.
restoration and mitigation provision for that.
yeah, and also actually, Crystal, when I was reading this section, I had circled property owners with any tree removed. I circled that to say, what do we mean, any tree? Are we talking about public trees?
right,
And as I'm reading through it, it's like anything on your property, and that should really only apply if you're doing, in re-landscaping, whatever, you've got some big thing that goes before the planning board, so yeah, I think we all.
it's a section that I think would get the most,
Yeah.
objection.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So code enforcement has the authority to enter onto any city property to issue stop work order. They would also be the ones, if there's a tree has been identified that's dangerous, they would be doing that. So we have to also talk through this with code enforcement.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, I thought, on the whole, I think, if you think it's ready to go to the informal town or?
Margaret, I actually don't. I think that it needs to be gone through one more time, the provisions that are gonna be added in, the ones taken out, and just one last, clean copy before it goes over to for informal.
So, I can follow up with CAC on some of the things that we wanted more clarity on. And then maybe you and I could work on
Absolutely.
it. I'm checking time,
Yeah, so
it's 6:51.
Great time.
No hands raised, okay, so we talked about trees. Next one is easy, filming,
Do we have?
that's documents 6 and 7. One of them is a, example from Newburgh, fee schedule.
Well,
And I don't know which one is which.
which one you want?
Yeah, we want to open the one that says chapter film and.
Yeah, that's what we got. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So. Ronnie, do you have any comments on this?
Not currently, thank you.
I have
Actually-
only, I have only 2 comments. Really. There's the section where it talks about concert filming. Did this come from some template or somewhere else?
Yes,
Okay. Where it talks about concert filming, for some reason, filming of a concert event for a non-profit or religious entity. I don't see why we have to call out religious entities. They're called out several times here. So it seems to me that if it's something that is being done for non-profit, that should be sufficient, because
right.
if you are
Religious entity.
if you are a church, you are non-profit. Right? So I think the one thing I would like to see is delete any reference to religious entities. I also was confused.
Keep going.
It's on page 3, permit required exemptions.
Oh,
So it says, film permit required, no person shall for commercial purposes use any kind of public property, facility or residence herein. Owned and controlled by the city, direct or conduct filming, without first applying for and obtaining a film permit from the mayor.
yes,
That tells me that if I'm a nonprofit, and I'm not doing it for commercial reasons, I don't need a permit. So I think the phrase for commercial purposes should be deleted. I'm not doing it for commercial purposes. Why is that there?
right. I thought you were, yeah, it's the same like the, mass gathering, even a non-commercial. I mean, a not-for-profit mass gathering still has to apply.
Right, so I think we should delete for commercial
Mhm.
purposes. Then I have a religious comment on the exemption, we can put it up. Then throughout, there's a little bit of confusion here as to whether, we are talking about, let's see. Under element C, any change on the applicant's permittees, et cetera. It should be submitted in writing to the mayor at least 24 hours in advance of the change. I think that should be changed to at least 1 business day in advance, because a lot of these things are done on weekends. And there's no point in getting something on Saturday morning for a change they want to do on Sunday. So I think at least 1 business day instead of 24 hours.
Okay.
Let's see. Traffic shall not be detoured across the double line without prior approval of the city of Hudson. I think that should read without prior approval of the Hudson Police Department.
Sorry, where are we here?
It's element F, sub element 5. We're on additional restrictions.
Okay,
7
I see.
F5. I think that should be HPD. Not city of Hudson. Yeah, and then there are appeals. The film permit applicant or permittee may appeal a denial. Why are we allowing an appeal process here?
Excuse me.
I mean, they're going to apply to a city department for a permit, the city says no, who are they appealing to? It's not like, you know, a board situation.
Well, I mean, you don't have to have an appeal procedure written in here. Their recourse would be to essentially file a lawsuit.
Right, but it's not, this is a privilege, it's not a right.
I understand. So, or I'm just confused. Are you taking, do you want there to be an appeal provision or don't you?
Well, I don't see the point of it, to be honest. Like, in what's it, how would they, I mean, if you want to make a phone somewhere and the city says, no, we don't want that, for whatever reason, it comes too disruptive or something like that.
Well, let's say we ask them to suspend because they've not been following the rules. They might wanna feel that. Okay. Or,
Oh, the revocation?
yeah,
I'm just not sure it should be filed with the mayor.
well, all these things are followed in there. I mean, mass gathering permits and all that stuff.
Which should be reviewed by the mayor or designee. I mean, typically, Crystal, in an appeal situation, you're appealing to an entity that was not involved in the decision that you're appealing. That's how usually, well, in my world, that's how it works. Because if I say no to you and you come back and appeal to me, you're appealing to the person who said no. And so if the permit's not gonna be granted, it's gonna be the mayor's office saying, no, we're not granting this permit today. So who are you appealing to?
It's essentially like reconsideration, and I guess this is where the litigation comes into play. You have an ability, you can have a judge say no, and you have the ability to go back to him and ask them to reconsider their decision. Chances for them to get that reversed, very low. And then after that, you go to your next level of court, which is essentially how this is written. It's that same similar type of procedure. I'm not sure the you know, if there was a discussion in play when it was written this way, but you know, obviously if the council wants to change it, it certainly can.
Because honestly, if we're gonna open ourselves up to lawsuits, we don't want somebody to do something on the kind to say, let's forget the whole thing. Right? That was it, that's all I had on that. 6:58.
I had just a question on this, just for my own education, I guess. Do these kind of permitting never really involve like fees for the city? Is that the
Yes,
norm?
it will involve fees, and the second attachment, this doesn't have anything in here, and I think we need to get a fee schedule from Michael. The second attachment had a sample fee schedule from the city of Newburgh. And so it had a fee schedule associated with the application fee, location fee, parking fees. If they were using half of the public space parking lot, there was a fee per day and so forth. So there is a sample fee schedule here, and I think maybe this one also, we need more on it before we take it to the council.
Oh, yes.
So, yes, if you look at the second document that came in with this, oh, okay, that was a sample from Newburgh.
Okay, I must have missed that. I see.
And right now, they're just using, mass gathering permits. There's no designated filming permit.
So it would be additional fees, and I think the Newburgh thing, I think is very clear on parking, which I think is definitely something that should be.
Absolutely, since they bring in huge
Yes, they bring
private
huge
services
services.
and all that stuff.
So the reason I was asking about the fees is maybe we can, I mean, I just did a, very quick skimming of it. But the reason I was asking about the fee is that we could add a provision that if the mayor deems it to be in the best interest of the city, we can maybe waive the fee, because it may, maybe filming brings in good things for the city like business and staying and things like that. The mayor should have an option to be like, all right, well, because a lot of cities do have provisions where they get the little thank you at the end of the credits because they've gotten some sort of
Yeah, publicity,
yeah,
right.
that's the reason I was asking. Thank you.
Everyone.
So we have one left, we can leave it till next month.
Oh, let's just go through it, we're here.
Ronnie, are you okay?
What was the question?
It's the local law amending the city
We have
code.
only one left,
It's the alarm law.
it's the alarm.